Hello everyone and welcome to the Imagining Innovations webinar series. I am today's host, Katanya Patha from the Department of Family Medicine. The title of today's topic is Can You Hear Me? Communication, Deafness and Innovation in Time of Masks and Screens, in which our panel would consider the communication implications and challenges of this pandemic and the restrictions that came with COVID-19 for us all. Our panel will share their reflections and begin to project us through into a future of innovation emerging from the pandemic. To our audience that are with us today, thank you for joining. The live transcript has been activated. If you are unable to see this, please select the three dots at the bottom of your screen and select subtitles. Our panel today consists of Dr. Victor D'Andrade, who is an audiologist and senior lecturer in the Department of Speech Pathology and Audiology at Wits. He supervises students from the university in their clinical placements and works in the university speech and hearing clinic. We also have Hiten Bauer, who is an artist, architect, and illustrator based in Johannesburg. Hiten is a profoundly deaf person with bilateral cochlear implants and holds a Master of Architecture from a degree from the University of Cape Town, and he also runs his own creative practice called Studio HB. We have Anthony Gama, who works at the Wits Language School as a part-time facilitator, teaching South African Sign Language and pursuing a full-time PGCE in deaf education. And he hopes to make more changes in deaf learners' lives because we do have a shortage of deaf qualified teachers in South Africa. Anthony was born hearing and became deaf at the age of 5, but I'm sure he will go into that with you. And our sign language interpreter today is Keta Mokotsane from the Wits University Disability Rights Unit. She holds an honors degree in language practice from the University of the Free State. She also completed level 1 sign language interpreter training with the Northwest University, as well as legal and medical interpreting courses through Deaf SA. We will start with our speakers, and should anyone have any questions, please post them in our Q&A box and comments in our chat box, and we'll get to them at the end. Our first speaker today is Victor.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the session. And it's with great humility and great pleasure that I'm able to share some ideas with you and share the platform with the other presenters. So, Smangalisa, if you'll please just put it into the slideshow mode, and then we can get started. Thank you very much. So, thank you for the introduction too. And I think the next slide, please. We've come to realize that communication is about connection. We connect with other people, with history, with future, all through communication. We connect in multimodal and multisensory ways because communication involves facial expression, body language, gestures, words, sounds, signs. And this is what makes our human interaction special, in that our language is generative. That is, we can create sentences and expressions that have never been heard before. So I can say something random like, the moon is blue in Morocco tonight, and it can be understood. Therefore, because human language is creative, we're able to engage in these multimodal aspects to understand what is being expressed. So with the obligatory face mask wearing, communication has become compromised, and there have been misunderstandings in our communication and connection. This interrupted connection seems to have been experienced regardless of the communication mode, be it spoken or signed. So, keeping with the slide, please. Besides the physiological impact of COVID-19 on communication, example, changes in hearing levels due to damage to the ear, tinnitus, that's buzzing or ringing in the ears, dysarthria, that is muscle weakness of speech muscles, of the tongue, etc., that makes speaking difficult, muscular weakness affecting the limbs, therefore affecting gesture. All of these have been reported as some sequelae or consequences of COVID-19. So COVID-19 has impacted on our way of communication, our way of communicating, but has also interrupted communication by cutting people off from each other through the restrictions in personal and group contact. Our connection was interrupted. For people with deafness, that connection was especially severed because of the distance communication and mask wearing. But what does it matter? But what does it matter anyway, you may think? There aren't many people whom this would affect, right? Well, think again. Next slide, please. The World Report on Hearing, which was released in March of this year, showed that there are many people with deafness. More than 1.5 billion people, or 20% of the global population, may have some hearing difficulty. The majority of these, about 1.16 billion, have mild hearing loss. However, a substantial portion, or 430 million people, that is about 5.5% of the global population, experience moderate or even higher levels of hearing loss. But more than that, as caring, humanist, interconnected people, umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu, we have concern for our fellow person, and we are also considerate of their experience, even if it is different to ours. Next slide, please. A lot of communication was now in the COVID era, not in person, but virtually. And for people with deafness, it meant that they had to try and communicate and connect within the limits of poor connectivity, poor telephony, degraded signals, together with their deafness. For people without hearing impairment, hearing over Zoom, WhatsApp calls, cell phone signal, etc., can already be challenging. How much more so for people who have deafness? Research has shown that due to these communication challenges experienced during COVID, people experienced increased levels of anxiety, stress, isolation, feelings of inadequacy, vulnerability, fear, sadness, embarrassment, lack of confidence, frustration, anger, fatigue, amongst others. Next slide, please. For deaf people, there was an interruption in the connection because the mask's muffled speech and already difficult listening was exacerbated by the masks, but also by the removal of lip reading cues. Facial cues and facial expressions were now well masked, which removed the communication enhancement offered by facial expressions. Research conducted over the last year showed that face coverings negatively impacted hearing, understanding, engagement, and feelings of connection with the speaker. Face coverings made communication tiring, frustrating, and embarrassing, both as the speaker wearing a face covering and when listening to someone else who is wearing one. And I quote from the Sanders et al. 2021 study that I've taken these images from. And I quote, "Face-to-face coverings have far-reaching impacts on communication for everyone, but especially for people with hearing loss. These findings illustrate the need for communication-friendly face coverings and emphasize the need to be communication aware when wearing face coverings." Close quote. Next slide, please. The interrupted connection was especially felt by older adults in residential care homes for older people, when visitors were not allowed in to reduce the spread of the virus. So older adults with hearing loss were especially affected because they struggled to hear over the telephone and were unfamiliar with information communication technologies such as Zoom and WhatsApp, etc. Recently, we conducted a study, Talia Urdang and I, and we explored some of the communication challenges with deaf older adults. The research revealed the magnitude of these challenges in communication and in using the innovative technology that many of us take for granted, as per this excerpt from an interview from our study. Next slide, please. So, where are the opportunities for innovation to reduce the impact of communication interruptions and connection breaks? Let's start by looking at relational considerations for enhancing communication in a world of masks and social distancing, as well as distance communication. Schlegel and Jones in 2020 suggest that the starting points are in attending mindfully when communicating with other people, so that we are considerate of the challenges they may be experiencing. We ought to be mindful of our non-linguistic cues and avoid body language that expresses frustration, anger, or impatience when communicating with someone who has deafness. Moreover, in audiology, we encourage communication enhancement strategies to use when communicating with somebody who wears hearing aids. Keep sentences short, speak slightly slower to allow the hearing aid to catch sounds, speak a little louder but without shouting, reduce background noise, and communicate within well-lit environments so that other modalities can be included. Next slide, please. PCs, laptops, smartphones, and tablets can be used for typing what is being said for the deaf person to read. But apps can also be used to transcribe what the speaker is saying in real time so that the deaf person can read what is being said. And here's just an example, not a publicity, just some examples of such applications. Zoom, Google Meet, Teams, etc., just like we have in this meeting, have transcription settings where the person who is deaf can read what is being said. Also, by including a sign language interpreter on the video call, the sign language interpreter can facilitate communication between the deaf and hearing person, as we have in our session today. Next slide, please. Furthermore, apps can enhance communication between people who use sign language and people who use speech, as per this example. And we also see the drive and the need for more research and more development in this area. Next slide, please. So yes, mask wearing has proven to be beneficial for reducing the spread of COVID-19, but these valuable masks can interrupt lip reading and facial cues. Therefore, there have been see-through mask designs and implementation to assist with reducing this interruption. Here's an example of what is needed to make a see-through mask. And these guys have thought of everything. For example, you'll see at the bottom there that it's suggested to include soap in your preparation kit. Well, that's because they suggest that rubbing some soap on the see-through plastic can reduce the chance of steaming up that can occur inside the see-through mask. Next slide, please. This is just one example of many available resources to look at, which can be utilized to facilitate communication with people who are deaf or who experience challenges with hearing. These kinds of technologies offer, besides enhanced communication, they also offer autonomy for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. But let us, even with all this technology, look at ways of supporting and assisting people who may struggle using this technology. Next slide, please. The innovation is out there looking at enhancing communication, and we must explore the opportunities for connection. And this is from the World Intellectual Property Organization that tracks technology and advancements in design. And you can see that hearing has been in the foreground of this. And I was involved with writing up this report, and it was really, really interesting to see all the developments in place and coming up to do with communication. Next slide, please. This image that you see here is a photo that I took in downtown Joburg. It's a mosaic just off Main Street. And for me, it is a reminder that communication is composed of a collection of different elements that constitute communication in its entirety. So let's be mindful of hearing and deafness considerations all of the time, because they're always there, even if we don't always see or notice them. I ask you to revive communication and connection. Imagine a better outcome and find innovation in our interaction, communication, and connection with ourselves and with others. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Victor, for that very insightful talk, which I'm sure many of us have had never thought about when considering COVID-19 implications. Our next speaker is Hitem.
Hi, everybody. I hope you all had a good week. My name is Hitem Bauer, and I'm an architect and artist based in Johannesburg. I'm a profoundly deaf person with bilateral cognitive implant. I've had cognitive implant for 15 years now. Before that, I used to wear hearing aids, which doesn't help me much. So my cognitive implant at the start of the pandemic looked like this. Okay, basically behind the ear device with a coil and a magnet to attach to the back of the ear. I had to adapt the implant by changing the ear hook with the wire so that it can sit on the back of my ear. Yeah, like I just dropped it. So it can sit on the back of my ear properly without fully off. And this year, April, I've upgraded to a new cognitive implant device called the Cancel. The Cancel is smaller than the previous cognitive implant. I don't know if you can see. That is how small the Cancel is. And everything is compacted in the magnet. And so I put it on the back of my head. And I have to use the hair clips to secure it in place so it doesn't fall off. The technology of a cochlear implant have changed in the short space of time, but before I go into more details, I would like to share my experience of wearing a mask in the pandemic. So when I wear a mask for a cochlear implant, I adapted my mask because with the disposable mask and other masks that other people wear, it usually go over the ear. It doesn't work for me because I got cochlear implant and the mask will push it off. So I adapted my mask to have an elastic band, which will go around at the back of my head, and the bottom elastic band I just tie around the back of my neck. So that's very common for me. And it allows me to keep a mask on without pushing a cochlear implant off. Like Victor is showing you that there are some people in the hard of hearing community, and those with cochlear implant, the hearing aid, they adapted a mask to have a plastic shield on the front, so then other people can breathe them, or they have people who can breathe. But for me, I learned to adapt and get used to wearing a mask. And what I found was that wearing a mask is like a sort of a volume control. For most people, it's basically distort the sound and muffle the speech. So when people talk to me, I can't even hear them clearly. And they also can't hear me speaking clearly because the mask block out the sound. And also, when you wear a mask, it goes right against your mouth to make it difficult to breathe. I know people complain they can't breathe with the mask on. So sometimes I have to pull the mask forward so then I can speak clearly so the other person can hear me. And with the cochlear implant, I I have very little difficulty with listening and communicating because the pandemic have forced me to up my listening skills. I took away the lip reading aspect that I rely on, and also when people talk very much, I can't even see their face, I can't even read their lips, and I can't even tell if they are talking to me at all. So I had to divert my energy, my focus, and my concentration to listening, and I had to like rely on my cognitive implant to save the day. And it's not quite easy. And because all the energy being put toward listening to people and trying to make out every word and understand what they're trying to tell me, I often come home very tired and exhausted. So usually I just switch off my cognitive implant and start playing music on my phone until my parents get irritated with me and they start shouting at me, like, switch on the implant and why are you not listening to me? So that is one of the side effects of living up through the pandemic. And with the hearing loss, it does drain a lot of energy and put a lot of pressure on the listening and speaking and communication skill. And the one thing I noticed is that when I talk to the hearing people with the mask on, they will ask me to slow down and ask me to speak louder and to repeat, like, sorry, pardon me, can you tell me, can you repeat, please? Then at the moment, I'm wondering, like, why is everybody
Anna.
like they have a hearing loss? And
Yes,
that's funny because
I'm on speaker, yeah.
Okay, I'm just trying to, somebody's talking, so they've stopped talking.
Sorry, Vaishni, you're unmuted so we can hear you. Sorry, Hiten, you can carry on.
no problem, not a problem. So like I was saying that I was wondering why everybody is struggling with communication these days, why they're behaving like they have hearing loss. That when I realized that a lot of hearing people do actually rely on the breathing to a certain degree, and they don't even know it. And they do rely on looking at a person's face to communicate what they're trying to say. And they started doing things that a person with a hearing loss would normally do, like asking a person to repeat and to say, pardon, sorry, what did you say? Can you repeat? So hopefully in the future after the pandemic, when everybody stops wearing a mask, there will be a little bit more patient and considerate to people, especially people hearing loss, who ask them to repeat more than 2-3 times. And yeah, that's one of the interesting thing I've learned from a pandemic, that I have to treat people like they have hearing loss and be more considerate until they hear me. And if I come across another person who has hearing loss or is struggling to understand what when I'm speaking, then I would do them a favor by lowering my mask for a few seconds and tell them what I'm trying to communicate so they can lip read me. And then before I put my mask back on, I do sometimes learn sign language, like a basic sign language, to communicate key concepts, so to make them feel more included in the conversation. And before the pandemic, like Victor have shown you in the previous slide, the technology have changed in the short space of time. And there's some pretty amazing technology out there that benefit all people, not just people with hearing loss and deaf people. So before the pandemic started, I used to rely on my mini mic. And the mini mic is like a microphone that I should plug it into an iPod. So I should plug into an iPod and turn on the mini mic. And basically the device stream the music you might hear. And I can plug the mini mic into a laptop, into a TV, into any device that I need to stream to my implant. It's quite pretty cool. And then during the lockdown, a lot of technology came out, like the smartphone, the iPhone. Apple had the agreement with Cochlear to allow the cognitive implant user to download the app on the smartphone, right? And stream the phone call to my implant. It can stream phone call, music, video, YouTube music, any apps. And it changed my life a lot and it made my life a lot more easier. And yeah, so that's one of those new technology that came out. So, and one of the things about I noticed that the mini mic has become obsolete. I don't really use much anymore because now my phone takes place for mini mic, and my phone has become part of my life. So I cannot function normally without the iPhone and app to stream phone call to my head. Also, another thing that I've noticed during the pandemic is that a lot of the app and technology have improved and becoming more inclusive to people with hearing loss, people who speak in a different language, and people who can't understand like music, for example. So, for example, I'm going to show you a screen on my iPhone. So I'm listening to a song by Nina Simone, and on the iTunes, they have this lyrics to the song. So it's quite cool that when I listen to music under lockdown, a lot of music, I can follow the lyric and see what the singer is singing about. I can connect to the music and to the musician and song. And yes, there are some awkward moments when I come across a song that I like and I listen to it and read the lyrics at the same time. And I've been like, Ethan, what's going on? What have we been listening to all these years? And some of the songs are terrible. So I have to like delete some of the songs, like delete the song, delete that song. Goodbye, Beyonce. I'm not listening to you again. Okay, so besides the streaming of music and the phone call to my head, I also noticed that there are a lot of other tools that we can use to communicate with people and to enjoy life a little bit easier, like apps for calling a taxi like Uber, Taxify and Bolt. And there's an app for like Uber Eats and with the delivery and postmaster that allow me to order food at the tap of the button. Before the pandemic, 2 years ago, none of these apps existed. And for a person with hearing loss and cognitive impairment, it's difficult for us to actually make a phone call to order a pizza. Yeah, before Uber Eats actually existed, can you imagine a deaf person trying to use the telephone to call a pizza? They have to rely on the family member or a friend or the parent to make a phone call. And imagine you're not able to order a pizza because the mother said no. And unless you eat the vegetables that she prepared for you first. So like it's really tough back then. And it's the same thing when you go out and order taxi. I had to rely on people to make those phone calls for me. So now during the pandemic, all these apps came out, which allow me to do online shopping, to order food and to do delivery. And some of the app come with closed caption, which is powered by artificial intelligence. And I will let you guys know that a few years ago, before the pandemic, before closed caption became a big thing, usually we have someone on the other end of the lines in some room actually typing out the closed caption. But now all the companies are using artificial intelligence to streamline the process and give a live transcript. And I just want to bring to your attention that in the first 6 months of the pandemic, everybody is now trying to get used to Zoom meeting, team meetings, Skype, and video calling. These platforms didn't have closed caption for the first 6 to 8 months. And then I think those companies realize that more and more people are demanding for closed caption because they wanted to be included. They wanted to be able to follow the conversation. So they started introducing the closed caption in the Zoom meeting. And you can see at the bottom of the screen, which is quite awesome, but not 100% perfect. I noticed that when Victor spoke about mask, it actually translated as masked. So that was quite funny for me because it showed that technology at today's time is still not 100% perfect, but it's going to change a lot in the next coming years. And I'm really quite excited about the future because there will be more new technology coming out that will help us to communicate better, and that will benefit everyone and not just people with hearing loss and deaf people. Just imagine if there's a future where every counter, every cash store or at the bank, they will have a perspex screen sitting there, which gives you option to tap on live transport. So if your person you're dealing with want to speak to you, you can tap on live transcript and it gives you a closed caption. And you can follow the conversation easily with the mask on. Yeah, so that's it. The exciting time to be. Not the pandemic, I mean, but the technological revolution that's going on. And do I have enough time left to share my experience?
Yes, I think you can share a bit more, Hiten. I think we have about 3 minutes left for you.
Okay. If anyone have any question for me who would like to know more about my experience, please post a question on the comment section. I'll be happy to explain it further. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my experience of communication and listening during the pandemic.
Thank you very much, Hiten. Thank you for taking us through your life and talking us through these apps that, while we saw it was easier to use, we never saw its benefit to our hearing impaired. The questions are going to be taken at the end after Anthony has spoken, so we'll do the questions then. So we'll go on to our last speaker, who is Anthony, and he will be verbally interpreted by Keta. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Okay, Keta, please switch on your video. Okay, thank you. Again, good afternoon. My name is Anthony, surname Gama, and then that's my sign name. I am a deaf student here at Wits University. I am doing PGCE, and I'm also a facilitator for sign language at Wits Language School. And also, I just want to thank this opportunity to allow me to share my experience. I'm hoping that more deaf people have joined, and just want to share a bit more about my experience with wearing a mask in the deaf community during the pandemic. So we know that most deaf people get information very late. So when the whole COVID thing started, it was hearing people only who got the information. For most deaf people, they only later learned about the pandemic, or because they only procured interpreters late. So it would have been nicer if deaf people had their own news channel, just to share everything that is happening, also share it on Facebook and Twitter and so on. So most deaf people can also know what is happening in and around them. Just like we have English, Zulu news, Xhosa, Tswana, it would be nice also if we can have sign language news, because only like 20% of the deaf community can actually read and write. So masks have yes worked in reducing the spread of COVID, but and nobody asked us how we can be involved in trying to design a mask that will help, deaf people to be able to see non-manual features when they are signing, because just signing alone doesn't mean anything. So masks have blocked most of the things that most of the communication for deaf people is on the face. So with the mask on, it is difficult to see. And also those ones that were created that were clear, it was such a hassle, because when you breathe, there's mist on the mask, so on the shield. So it didn't really help the deaf community. So we have met and we always discuss the challenges. We kindly breathe. Even though you meet a person, they're signing, so you have to ask them to please take off your mask, and they don't want to. Some of them don't really want to take it off, or just move it down a bit, because only then you can fully understand 100% what the person is saying. So yeah, it is a big challenge. And then also now slowly I see there's like new masks as well, like shields, which is better, that you put on your forehead. Yeah, it's okay. It's better, because then a person can actually see your face, and also while protecting themselves against against COVID. So on TV and media, I remember when the president came to give the speech, when we had family meetings on SABC, like early when the whole COVID thing started, we didn't know anything. We didn't hear anything. Like, we just waited that maybe they're still busy, fixing something, and but then we missed most of the information, especially at the beginning. And then in the future, how we can solve some of these issues, I think, and I also believe that if we, like institutions, companies, the media, create like an office, or have like 2%, hire 2% of deaf people, staff members, to work with them, so that they up their communication skills with deaf people. So if there's a deaf person in your next office and you are busy organizing something, you will always remember that you also need to include them. So if there's more deaf people visible doing admin, doing things in the offices, in the government field, and also private sector, it will help. It also will help with opportunities for us to work together and create solutions going forward. So for media, on TV, if maybe government can give us again deaf channel, so that news can be shared amongst the people. then when you read, many deaf people are not good readers. So it will be much easier if they can get the information in their language. So we have a lot of communication barriers still with since the whole COVID things, even before, yes, we had. So now it is worse. When we hearing people when they were sitting in schools and the schools were closed, the programs on TV continued teaching, hearing kids about maths and English. So they got they got to continue, and the deaf children from deaf schools couldn't study because there were no interpreters. They couldn't follow what was being taught. And also now we have online deaf communication. Deaf community depend on facial expressions as well. So if the signal is bad, then it's a problem. Some have challenges like, the signal is really bad, the person freezes and you can't see what they are signing, but hearing people can actually hear the voice. So, again, data is expensive, and I don't know, we can maybe try and solve it if via maybe social service, maybe have like a special data plan for people with deafness, and maybe 3 minutes, because people who are hearing, they get 3 minutes to make calls. So why can't we also get 3 minutes, like maybe Vodacom gives us 3 minutes for video calls? So yes, we are having a lot of challenges, with network mostly and data. Yeah. So, and I hope that you all understood and you learned you learned a lot from my speech, and I will just wait for questions later. Thank you. Or if you have any questions, you can type in the question and answer and comment on the chat box. Yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Anthony, for taking us through your experiences and challenges through this pandemic. And thank you, Keta, for interpreting for us. We're going to take a few questions from our audience now. So I'm just going to open up the Q&A box. And if we could just spotlight our speakers and Keta so that they're able to answer for us. Catherine, I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A box. Do you have any?
We've actually assembled them, Kat, Dr. Partha, into the chat for you.
Perfect.
I'll try and group them together so you can see them again.
Great, thank you. So I do see one here from Dr. Anastasia Guani. She says, I'm curious to know how testing centers and treatment facilities interfaced with the hearing impaired during COVID, especially in the rural spaces, and especially if there were reading literacy challenges, if this was deficient, and how can we improve this? So would any of our speakers like to take that? Maybe I could ask Victor.
Thanks. Okay, I was going to suggest maybe Hiten and Anthony could talk about their experience, but what we've seen in practice is that it has been a challenge, especially because of the interruption from the masks, and literacy, as Anthony pointed out, literacy may be a challenge for people who are deaf. And so what has been done? Well, it often meant that we had to rework how the sessions happen. And so some of the conversations then had to happen outside, removing masks so that people could engage in that social distance and then still see faces for lip reading, and then going back inside, etc. So there were some ways of getting around it, but it did mean a change in the flow of things, and it maybe prolonged things a little bit for our clients, for people who are coming to see us. But yes, those are some of the real challenges, and maybe Anthony or Hiten can share some of their experience of those difficulties.
I'm going to go first. I think when I reflect on my experience, I think the technological change that I've seen in the past 2 years is a positive change for the wider community of deaf and hard of hearing people hearing loss, because all the change that we've been fighting for, that we've been asking for, like closed caption for SABC and MultiChoice and GSTV, we've been fighting for the access to social media, video, and TV series. So they are now widely available, and it's going to stay around for a very long time. So that's the good thing for us. So more and more people are going to start to take these inclusion apps and features for granted. So if we take it away, then people are going to start complaining they wanted those things, closed caption and assistive technology, to be back on and be permanent part of our everyday lives. And I think for many people with cognitive impairments, the pandemic actually forced us to adapt faster and to up our listening skills, our therapies, and move from in-person conversation to online virtual speech therapy, and then doing a lot of listening exercise on audio books, listen to TV, radio, music. So that can, in a way, the pandemic improving our listening and communication skills. I'm in a much better place than I was before the pandemic. I found that I am comfortable with having a Zoom meeting with more than 10 people. And initially it was awkward and uncomfortable. And now I am able to talk on the telephone with people in my network, like my colleagues or any random person, without having to see their face. So I'm able to make out the conversation over the telephone and get things done, which is important for my work. And another thing I'm glad is that the pandemic is forcing people to use video calling services. Before then, people don't want to video call me. They don't want to Skype or have a meeting with me over video calling. They rather want to speak to me on the phone or in person. So now they embrace the technology, and that makes our life a lot more easier. And then also, the other aspect is that we get to learn more words, more book, and begin to broaden our vocabulary. So we started to use a lot more words to communicate ideas and expressions that we never thought it was possible to do. We started to learn more from other people how to use certain words in the sentence or in the conversation. So those are a positive that I've gained from the pandemic and in isolation. I will give over to Anthony if he has something to share.
Okay, we have, yeah, what Ethan has said is yes, enough. I think the problem is that most deaf people can't read. So I think what we can do is maybe allow deaf people in communities to have, like, maybe if we can have our own channel where people can actually get the information in our own language. Because sometimes with the live transcript, some of the words are missed. Technology, yes, has helped, but then thing is, it's in English. So people who are speaking Xhosa, speaking Zulu, they still can't follow, just like some deaf people can't follow. So deaf people prefers visual communication. That's what works.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to take one of the questions from the Q&A box. It's from Subhashini Ellen, and she asks, how do we accommodate with COVID for the majority of our underprivileged deaf people who do not have access to apps and insufficient data, as Anthony has mentioned? And she asked a follow-up question. Which auto-generated caption software is most accurate for our essay context with varied accents and dialects? So just like how Anthony had just said, we would like it in our language, which is the best for South Africa? Who would like to answer first?
Okay, I can answer some of the question. I know times are tough, and not every person with a hearing loss or deaf person are privileged like me, and they do not have access to the resource or the support to afford an iPhone, for example, or a smartphone, and afford a network data. And it's unfortunate that we find ourselves in a situation where we don't get enough support from the disability organization and from our government when it comes to provision of assistive technology and tools. So in a university environment, I think the expectation fall onto the disability unit to provide the tool and the resource to help the student to thrive and to learn in the online learning environment. And I think because assistive technology and apps are considered tax deductible benefits. So if you are a tax-paying citizen and you have to spend money on cognitive implant battery, a mini mic, for example, you can claim the cost from a taxman, and then use the refund towards no immediate need or future technological need. And with regards to the caption software that is accurate for South African context, I think we are in the early stage of using artificial intelligence to do closed caption and to understand different dialects. I think with time, if people program the artificial intelligence to understand South African accent, then we'll be able to do closed caption perfectly and in different language from English, Afrikaans, Sotho, Zulu, and all the other native official language. And I've seen use of artificial intelligence that can translate the sign language into closed caption or speech. But it's still in the early development, so let's just hope that things will change and improve in time.
If I may, and reiterate what Hiten was just saying, in that the deafness is often an invisible disability, and so it doesn't always get the priority from government in terms of spending, in terms of resources, in terms of human resources. So there is often those challenges that are exacerbated by all of this. And so people are left out, admittedly. There is a lot of advocacy, and there's a lot of promotion of deaf rights and the need for the recognition of deaf people's needs. And as we were hearing, and Anthony's suggestion, for example, about maybe a particular rebate for people who use sign language to be able to use video calls as their most basic means of communication. There are some apps that do translate or do interpret, rather, spoken language, like Etienne was saying, from speech into sign and vice versa. And there have been some technological advancements looking at taking people using special gloves that then the AI is able to convert the signs into spoken or written language. However, there's always that difference between the two, and like you're saying, in a country where schools are still trying to build toilets for all the kids and trying to ensure that people are not going hungry, these kind of technological advancements don't necessarily always get the priority for people who need them.
Thank you very much, Victor and Hiten. Anthony, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I would love to add. Based on Sue's question, using real-time captioning and sign language and sign language interpreter, it's beneficial for all deaf people. But then when you have a person who was born deaf, never really went to school, will have difficulty reading and understanding, but I was lucky with DRU because they have sign language interpreter and also had real-time captioning, so you can choose between the two. So with real-time captioning, it really helps with your vocabulary and your reading skills as well. So, but then not all deaf people are that lucky or fortunate, so to even access university and have that choice between this or that. But yeah.
Thank you very much, Anthony. So I'm going to just put together two of our questions. One is from Matthew McClure and another is from an attendee of ours, which follow on from each other. Unfortunately, this will have to be our last question for today, and our speakers are more than welcome to go into the chat and individually respond to questions there for you. So the question Matthew and our one attendee is asking is, have we learned anything from previous pandemics like the flu pandemic, and what did we notice there with communication barriers? And to follow on from that, the CDC in the US implemented mandatory mask wearing in educational institutions and government buildings for deaf, hard of hearing, and people with hearing loss. And the policy stipulates that people who are deaf, hard of hearing, or with hearing loss are not required to wear a mask for obvious reasons. Do you think South Africa will be implementing such things, or should there be implementations to accommodate, what implementations could be done to accommodate these communities? Victor, I see your hand went up, so.
If I may, just to jump in, a few things. One, regarding the second question about the deaf person not wearing the mask, that's all well and fine if the deaf person is able to do that, but there's also the person to whom that deaf person is speaking, so then won't be able to see lips and won't be able to engage in lip reading or read the facial cues. So as far as I know, that hasn't been policy here, but I think that there have been some accommodations made in that regard. About Sorry, just remind me the first question. It was about
the 1918 flu
oh
pandemic.
yes, that's it.
Yeah.
So what I was going to say is that South Africa has been in the situation where we've been dealing with communicating with masks for a long time. Actually, South Africa's epidemic of tuberculosis has meant that many people have had to wear masks regardless. And one of the challenges with tuberculosis in the past especially is that the medication for treating the tuberculosis was ototoxic. So it used to induce hearing loss at high levels in people who were receiving the medication. And so it meant that people were wearing masks and were becoming deaf because of the treatment that they were receiving. Things have changed, and there have been some treatment regimens that have reduced the risk of ototoxic hearing loss. But we've been doing it for a while. So yes, so from the 1918 pandemic, there have been some of those developments that relate to some of the technology. But admittedly, because in the past, it affected a smaller group of people. So people with TB, people who are deaf and have TB. Now that the whole world is affected, now it's a problem. And so I'm hoping that also through some of these discussions that we're having and the highlighting of the need for innovation, let's get the engineers on board, let's get the digital developers on board, and let's get these things going in terms of contextually appropriate, contextually attuned services, as well as services that meet the needs of people, not just fancy and pretty, and recognizing everybody. So just because it's now the world's problem, now it gets the attention. Let's make the attention all the time.
Thank you so much, Victor. Anthony, is there anything you'd like to add? And then I'll move to Hiten.
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you. Hiten?
No, I'm just reading the comments, and I'll answer some of them if I see something that I need to respond to.
Perfect, thank you. Hiten, anything you'd like to add?
I'm good, thank you.
Great, thank you very much, everyone. That does bring us to the close of our session today. And I want to thank our panelists for our robust and our personal talks that you have given us. And we would also like to apologize to our panelists and our audience for our technical issues we experienced earlier. I'm glad we got that fixed. And thank you again for all your questions. Like I said, our panelists may want to answer some of the questions in the chat box after we close. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Should you want to see this recording, please access the WITS Where To site. And we also have another insightful session next week, Wednesday between 1 and 2, where you can join us. Thank you very much.